Hello, today's video is about how you compare poems. I'm making it using AQA, English Literature, Paper 2, Modern Text and Poetry for the exams in 2017. But the skills I'm going to show you will always be true of poetry comparisons, whatever the exam board and whatever the year, even if it's 2030. How you compare poems won't change. Here is the only sample question that AQA have so far released. It's on Ozymandias, and I'm deliberately not going to do an answer to this poem simply because it's highly unlikely this will be the actual exam question in 2017. It would be crazy. So I'm going to do it on two other poems. But the structure of the question will be exactly the same. Compare the way the poets present ideas about power in this poem, whichever it is, and one other poem from Power and Conflict. The first question that you might be thinking about is, how do you choose which poem to compare with another? And that seems really difficult. But don't waste time worrying about that, because the section is called Power and Conflict. In other words, any poems can be compared. And if I were you, I'd do the named poem and then your next favourite. Don't spend time worrying about what will best fit. In fact, you'll get a much more creative and insightful response if you take your favourite poem and make it fit. It'll make you think of many more original comparisons. And that's my top bit of advice before we actually get to the mechanics of comparing. So I did this for about half an hour when my class were writing, and I chose London because I just had a discussion on it with my daughter. You can follow the link to that video. And the other one I chose was The Charge of the Light Brigade. Now, one obviously takes place in London, the other's about a Crimean War. There's absolutely no war specifically in London, and that didn't bother me at all. The difference between them let me know that I would have to be creative in comparing them, and that was a strength. So I'll show you what I mean with the answer that I wrote. Okay, the most important thing I've been telling you in all of my videos is that the higher grades are on offer for you discussing the author's viewpoint. So here our authors are poets, Blake and Tennyson, and I've just highlighted in yellow so that you can see that I constantly reference their names. I do that because it forces me, when I'm writing, to write about their points of view. So every single paragraph has got their name in it, which means every single paragraph, potentially, if I've written it well, is going to be in the top grade. I can't help but get in the top grade because I'm discussing that point of view. If we follow it through as a kind of stitch, you will see the next most important feature of my comparison. I go from Blake to Tennyson to Blake. This whole paragraph's about Blake. Then to Tennyson. This paragraph's about Tennyson with a brief contrast to Blake here. Then this paragraph is about Blake. The next one is about Tennyson. And then my two concluding paragraphs are much shorter because they're really, if you like, one big paragraph, but contrasting Blake and Tennyson finally. Now, many of your teachers, and I've done this myself in the past, will say, well, look, write about the named poem first, put all your points down about the named poem, and then write about your second poem. And when you write about your second poem, then keep comparing backwards. Now, yes, you can do that, and it will give you a very good comparison. However, I'm going to show you why I think this structure is better at the ANA Star. The reason it's better is because of the examiner's criteria. There's a lot of language in the assessment criteria which doesn't really mean anything solid. For example, judicious use of precise references. Well, precise references are quotations, but what does judicious use mean? It doesn't mean anything other than you just get the feeling that this is really good. However, exploratory comparison, how do you show that you're exploring? Well, one of the ways is that paragraph structure that I've shown you. Now, if we come across to this section, we can see that at the top level, a candidate's response is likely to be critical, that word exploratory again, but look at this, a well-structured comparison. Well, you've got very little structure if you deal with one poem first, and then you just write about the second poem, occasionally referring back. That is a very basic structure. So if you want to say to the examiner, look, pay attention, I've got a really well-structured answer here, then I think you have to use the paragraph structure that I'm giving you, that alternate structure where you alternate between one poem and the next constantly. Another advantage of that is that you will be doing this. There will be a fine-grained analysis. Now, fine-grained is a description of what you get in wood. It's very difficult to apply this to a piece of writing. An examiner is going to sit there and think, what on earth does this mean? However, when they see alternate paragraph structures, each of those paragraphs, if you like, is like a grain of your analysis. And if you keep switching between one and the other, they're going to think to themselves, oh, right, okay, I've got an idea. That could be what fine-grained looks like. Thank God. Whereas if you do one poem in one big chunk, and then the next poem in one big chunk, it's definitely not fine-grained, is it? It's big blocked, if we're going to use strange language that the examiners might appreciate. So the very difficulty for examiners of understanding the criteria that they've got to apply is going to help you, because you've now got a simple method that will force them to give you the marks. In my next video, I'll go through the content of this answer, which will show you how to write about the poet's points of view. But my highlights here in colours are actually to show you how the answer is structured. So you'll remember that power was my key word that I was writing about in the question. And hopefully you can see that I've put the word power in every single paragraph, or a way that I've interpreted power. So here with authority, here with the ruling class and government, here with the powerful, then with power again, then we have in the conclusion what represents power in the poems as society's rules, the government, the church, and then again the social rules that we all accept. So that shows you and the examiner that I'm answering the question every single paragraph. I'm not writing anything that doesn't score marks. I also want to show the examiner that I'm continually looking at different points of view, and I do that with my connectives. Consequently, instead, in contrast, therefore. This is a similar point here, and so I haven't got a contrasting connective in my next paragraph. However again, here we don't have a connective, but we do have this phrase here, this refusal to ask questions. So we know that refers back to the question asked in this paragraph. And then finally, instead and in marked contrast in the final conclusion. So that's how you show the examiner your essay can't be chopped up and put in a different order. These are stitches, if you like, that make these paragraphs fit the order you've placed them in. So let's go back to the examiner's success criteria. Is it a convincing exploration? Well, if I keep swapping from one paragraph to the other, each looking at an opposing view, it has to be. And it has to be looking at one or more ideas or perspectives, because I'm always writing about the poet's perspective, which means I'm always using interpretations. So just that structure that I've shown you forces me to get into the top band. Well, I hope you found that helpful, and as usual, if you'd like more videos like these, don't forget to subscribe.